All right, so here is the end of the presentation. You're a grower, you've made the decision to produce some crop, but you haven't made the final decision what you're going to grow or what variety within that crop you're going to grow. So, what are you going to think about? And one of the first things you're going to think about is the local or seasonal adaptation. What grows well in the area? If I'm here in Salinas, I'm not selecting things like corn and tomatoes and watermelons. I can grow other things. I can grow pumpkins. I can grow lettuce. I can grow a lot of things that can handle the cool weather. And so you have to think, what is the general or regional adaptation for that time of year? What can I grow? But you also have to think about the microclimates. And the microclimates are very important because if I'm here in Salinas, I still don't know what might be great or not great to grow. So, for example, over near Nob Hill, the Blanco area, as it's called, just off the 68 corridor on either side of 68 there, as you're going out past Nob Hill. And that's very different than if you just go down River Road in some of the canyons. It's close, but it's so different. And if another area, if you're going down towards Soledad, or if I'm over by Old Stage Road, uh, every area is slightly different and sometimes very significantly different in terms of variety selection. And it can be really important. Something as similar or as close as a matter of feet can sometimes matter. Uh, I'll give you two examples. I used to grow over by the old Firestone plant, which is now what, Firestone Business Park, I think they call it. And if I was up on top near Firestone, we could grow whatever we wanted. But if I went down closer to the river, there were some disease problems, and I had to grow something else because it was just a little bit different just down the cutout. In Yuma, I had a similar situation where there were two fields and there was just a small shelf or terrace between the two fields, and they were only 10 feet elevation apart, and they were right next to each other, 20 feet from one to the other. But because of the way one was lower, it also had some air trapped on that particular area. So in the summer, that particular trapped air block that was the lower block was like a solar oven. And it was definitely several degrees warmer than the one up top. Now, I did very little actual summer production there. I did mostly winter or fall. And in the winter, what happens with cold air? Cold air sinks. So overnight, the cold air would go down the valley and it would settle in this one lower field. And so we'd have frost problems, things wouldn't grow as quickly. We'd have to make sure we scheduled harvesting on freezing days in the afternoon rather than the morning because it would take that much longer to thaw the lettuce. And it was really hard to convince the guy in charge, but I always recommended we plant a different variety there. He's like, it's right next door. We're planting on the same damn day. What are you talking about? A different variety? But I think our data proved it after some time that just that little bit of temperature difference made enough difference to pick a different variety. And you could feel it on a cool day going out there early in the morning just after sunrise. I would be out there in the sun and in the top field, and it's starting to warm up a little bit. And as I walk down to the other field, I can feel on my legs as the cool air, as I'm walking into the cool air. If I can feel it, so can the lettuce. Yield. How much yield do you want? Some people think always more is better, but that's not the case. For some things, the more pounds per acre you can get is more profit, and that is true. And so you have to think about yield. What is your optimum yield? But it's not necessarily maximizing yield. If I'm growing apples and I get too much apple on my tree, I can actually break off branches and damage my tree. If I'm growing grapes for winemaking, too much pounds per acre, and I'm going to get paid less because it's considered a lower quality wine grape if I get too many pounds per acre. And so you need to know, what is the optimum yield for my growing situation? What about product quality? Some people go for high volume versus high quality. And so there are a lot of things. Most people say, I want quality, but quality for what? What does my customer need? How do I define quality? And so you need to be thinking through the eyes of your customer. Who's going to buy this product? And sometimes you don't know what those criteria are. And so you have to grow for the maximum sales potential. So, for example, um, we used to grow some lettuce that was called sharpshooter, and sharpshooter was fabulous heads of crisp head lettuce that would grow very, very well for the grocery store. The problem was sharpshooter sucked when you chopped it up and put it in a bag. It just didn't like being in a bag. It wouldn't hold very well in a salad. And sometime in the late 90s, uh, it started to get a little bit of a bad reputation. And by 2000, sharpshooter was out. Nobody wanted to grow it because you never knew if one of your customers might want to stick it in a bag of salad, especially with all of the stuff going on there with Fresh Express and, at the time, Tanamore and Antle and Dole being really big in the salad market. You don't want to grow something that's going to immediately alienate a potential customer. I can't sell it into the salad market. So quality, what are the things you need to sell? Disease resistance, I gave you the example of the Firestone plant region where something just a few 100 feet difference was huge in terms of disease issues in that particular area. Now, I say here disease resistance or tolerance, they're not the same thing. And this is important to know. This is a very important distinction. Disease resistance is generally a single gene genetic switch that says, yes, the plant can get the disease, or no, it can't. And it doesn't mean all of the disease, but that particular variation. If it mutates, it might be able to still infect. But the mutation or mutations that are running around in a given area, it either can or cannot infect. It's a simple yes or no. And tolerance means that I have a much greater probability of being able to grow a variety all the way to harvestable maturity and end up with a saleable product, a quality product that somebody will buy. That's tolerance. Now, it still might get the disease, but my chances of it getting either very little of the disease or none of the disease is better if it's tolerant. It still can get it, though. And some people have to be careful. Now, in this day and age, most people don't lie about that. They'd be laughed out of the industry if they tried it. But there are things that are scientifically important in terms of tolerance that are not considered tolerant in the industry. So, for example, if I had a variety of lettuce that was 50% tolerant to a particular disease, and the definition of that meant that in my control group, every head was covered in lesions. In my tolerant group, every head is covered only 50% in disease lesions. It's still garbage. I still can't sell it. That's not tolerance if it does not allow you to sell the product. So it only has tolerance if it increases your probability significantly of having a saleable product. Changing market requirements. Things change all the time. You go back to when I came to this valley in the 90s, and who the hell knew what arugula was or frisee? And now those kinds of things, maybe you know, maybe you don't, but they are ingredients in some of these bagged salads, and people are buying these specialty types of crops. Kale. Kale used to be nothing in terms of the market around here. Now it's a really important commodity. Maybe you're glad for that. Maybe you're like, kale, go away. I wish you were never here. You taste horrible. Some people love it, some people hate it, but still, it is a changing market. Uh, in the wine industry, if you want a funny movie, it's definitely not uh, a kid-friendly movie. It's rated R and deservedly so. Um, oh shoot, what is it called? Just slipped out of my head. Sideways, and it's about two guys, kind of these two mismatched friends that go on a trip through the Napa wine country, and the whole movie, there are these little backstory, little subtle things where they're disrespecting the wine variety, the red wine variety Merlot, and they're talking up Pinot Noir. Pinot Noir is wonderful and Merlot sucks. Well, what was going on at the time the movie came out years ago? Merlot was like the number one go-to red wine. You go to a restaurant and you order a generic house red wine, it's always Merlot. Merlot, Merlot, Merlot was huge. And Pinot Noir was this little tiny niche. After the movie came out, they traded places in terms of wine prices, grape prices, and the wines as well. And so some of the growers who had Merlot were pissed off at the movie. And other growers who had just planted some Pinot Noir were like, yes. Now all of a sudden their price of grapes just went up huge for Pinot Noir. So again, how many people saw that movie? It was just a niche movie, but it was powerful enough because it created a small trend, and even people who didn't see the movie ended up being influenced by the trend because there were people in restaurants and bars and other places that were serving it now. Some of the bars were offering it and promoting it. And so it just kind of caught fire, completely changed the industry. You got to be paying attention to those things. What is strong now and what are the trends in markets? There are lots of other factors, what I would call the um, Me Too factors. I didn't want to say minor because they can be very significant, but there are lots of them. And what's important in your commodity, your crop that you're trying to grow? Maybe you want a certain color, a certain nutrition level, post-harvest performance, like the salad in the bag, the sharpshooter that doesn't like being in a bag. What is it? Shelf life, flavor, sheen or shininess, uniformity, um, seed production potential. Nobody cares when they're at the grocery store buying lettuce whether it makes good lettuce seed. But if I'm a grower who developed a variety and I can't get very many pounds of seed per acre when I'm going to try and make seed to sell to the farmer, I care a whole lot. And I've had to throw some varieties out over the years, tomatoes, lettuce, and spinach, because I loved them. They were great performers in the field. They made great product for the consumer, but they just weren't efficient to make the seed. And we were in the business of selling seed. So if it doesn't make good seed, it wasn't something that made sense. On to the next variety. The cost, certainly, there are some things that are more expensive than others. Can you even get it? And there's only so much seed for a given variety, or so many transplants of that particular strawberry variety that you might want to plant. How much is out there? Can you get your hands on it? Can you be one of the customers that gets it? Uh, Maybe yes, maybe no. And when you're making the final decision, what am I going to grow? You need to rely on evidence, data. What is the performance of the varieties in trials? Hopefully, you visited some trials that other people are growing to show how their variety works in your area. Maybe you grew your own. Uh, every grower that I've worked with has always done their own personal trials, as well as we would go to every trial we could possibly go to and look at things. What do we like? What's new? What's interesting in today's market. But it's all about data. Collect data. Don't just rely on somebody recommended or some seed company said, oh yeah, try this. You know, they're trying to sell you something. But seed companies can't sell you something that's going to be crappy, or they're not going to get return customers. And it's a small world here. You start pissing off the wrong people as a seed company, you're going to run out of customers real fast. But they might not sell you the best thing because either they've run out of it or their competitor has something that's a little better than theirs. So again, you need data. Um, you don't want to just guess. You don't want to just say, well, I've thought about it and I'm going to cross my fingers and hope this works. No, again, data. And that is it for this presentation.